Regina Carter with Listen Here, a very, very popular song. And this is her interpretation of it. This is Leid Stories. I'm Utrice Leid, and we continue our discussions because it's what? Free Your Mind Friday. Now, I'm sure there will be no surprise if uh, much of the discussion today is going toward or pertains to uh, the current situation in Washington, D.C., but it is not the only thing that we could talk about. We have lots to talk about. I just wanted you to know, and I wanted to remind you that the program is for anything that is on your mind, in particular, that you have a very strong view about and want to express that view. So don't feel that you have to talk about impeachment or any related subject. It's still wide open. It is your program, and you express yourselves about the things that are important to you and that you feel very strongly about. So let's get started. 888-874-4888 is the number to call. It's wide open as usual. It's an unscripted program. It's our open forum, and you should feel no constriction in terms of what it is you want to raise and want to share with other listeners and you want to talk about. The situation remains the same. We are keeping to that philosophy today. 888-874-4888. Marie from Baltimore, you're on the air.
Good morning to you,
Hello.
you
How are you?
Trish, for your comments yesterday concerning the funeral of Elijah Cummings. You're
Yes.
not the only one who feels that way. There is someone else here on our airways that will be expressing for the second time tomorrow things about Cummings that will be quite interesting. And so you're not alone. And there's other people out here that also feel the same as I do. I just wanted to call you really in reference to about Ohio in 2017 had the second highest death rate due to drug overdoses in the U.S., behind only West Virginia. In a statement, the three major distributors said the settlement money should be used in a focused way on such things as treatment, rehab, and mental health services. Also, the summertime poppy jug to show that the world has long known about the dangers of opioids. I guess that's how you say it. OxyContin maker Purdue Pharma, often cast as the biggest villain in the crisis, reached a tentative settlement last month that could be worth up to $12 billion with a B dollars. But half of the states and hundreds of local governments opposed it. It remains to be seen whether the settlement will receive the approvals it needs. Lastly, the new plan is for Walgreens and other pharmacies to go to trial within 6 months. That's all I have to say, dear, and you have a good day.
Oh, thank you, Marie. You too. Have a good weekend, and it was so good to hear from you today. Thank you. Daryl from New York, you're on the air.
Miss Lee, Darrell McPherson, Bronx, New York. Bring back the city news.
The City Sun.
Sun. That's where I am. Okay, we blew the opening. You trees. It, I was I don't happen to be. I was listening to the Tom Hartman show because that's what they're playing on WBAI. Remember that station, WBAI? And
Uh, yes, I think I do.
yeah, somebody came on from Pacifica. Now, BAI was in the middle of a fundraising drive. They were beginning to get 10,000 days, and Gary No had just donated $12,000 so that they could catch up with their premium. Maybe 1,200. Let's not win on the money. Woman comes on and says, "We're not going to sell the station, and we're giving them programming. We had to shut down the local programming to preserve the Pacifica Foundation." Now, if a station is raising $10,000 a day coming out of a pit that it had been in for, I'd say 5, maybe 10, maybe forever, but it was making the comeback, why would you interrupt, fire the staff in the middle of a fund drive, and then raise money for the station that they're replacing the programming with, telling New Yorkers that you're supposed to be calm because your local programming will be back?
Well, WBAI continues to be um a mystery and a puzzle
Yes.
in terms of how it is run. The Pacifica system, especially in recent years, it's mind-boggling how that entire system is run and how they could possibly expect anything but failure the way things are run. Uh, it's amazing to me that it has lasted this long. Um,
May I
so
add one more thing? The reason that Pacific is unable to get, according to this woman, the reason Pacific is unable to get the matching funds was because of BAI.
well, there were people looking some time ago when I came in as a general manager, having been on air, just being an on air person, and I was asked to run the station, which I did. It was the first time. We raised so much money, and it was a mess. It was an absolute mess. But we had people who were working, and I couldn't discuss the details at the time. People who say they love democracy now
No.
and forever, who were actually trying to
Cooing.
kill the station.
Yep.
And they had gone through an elaborate effort to raise funds from wealthy donors, hoping that that would entice Pacifica to sell the station, and that entity will take it over and do with it what it pleases. So, but they didn't calculate the fact that we had a very good staff, we had very devoted listeners, and through it all, they wanted like a pitched fight. I'm not into fighting. I'm not into fighting because I know when I get into a certain spot, I don't care about the damage I do. I reach a point where I just, I have to be very careful. So we persevered, and right after, not right after it, but soon after, we restored the station and the entire network, actually, because we did vigorous fundraising and people were just fantastic. We were able to save or help save the Texas station, and uh, and we were able also to keep the Washington D.C. station going. And people, they're quite simple. These revolutionaries, very simple-minded, and they didn't understand the concept that if you have a network of 5 stations and they're not doing well, BAI was a strong station, and even so was underperforming, just underperforming.
Correct.
We raised a record amount of money in the shortest time. And the idea was to help the other stations to, get themselves stable. And in the meantime, we'll figure out the plan to do just that. But there are people, again, who were aggressively at work, targeting African American and Latino communities, in particular, for annihilation, and weakened them to the point that the stations that historically served them would die. So that
Put a time frame on that, please.
I'm sorry?
Could you put a year on that?
Oh, geez, I wiped all of this out of my mind.
Okay, all right. I don't want to burden you with that. What I want to know is, how do you find anything about what's happening with the station when the most progressive station that, other than PRN in the nation, has been hobbled by its owner?
Oh, I wouldn't say that. I think that's unfair to say. What Gary has done consistently, he's not doing anything new. He consistently has supported Pacifica and all of its stations.
No, you misunderstand what I said. In the Pacific, it's just stab Gary in the neck again.
Yeah, because he is one of the tested entities. He raises money for the stations, and they don't appreciate anything at all. They don't even understand what people are doing, and they have no gratitude. They have no gratitude at all. In trying to save the stations, for example, I'll give you from New York so you would understand this. The idea is that there really isn't a progressive station, an independent progressive station in New York City.
There's nothing in New York City.
And to assist the station by helping it raise funds and by providing his programming for free to the station, they don't get it. They don't get these things. So you have to, in some cases, you have to leave them alone because they are dedicated to being ignorant and really just oblivious to how you do business. They think that by having a business mindset, that somehow you're selling out. It's a silly stuff. You go back to the history of Pacifica, and there's a lot of nuttiness in that history, a lot of craziness in that history that actually made them forego great opportunities to grow and to be a powerhouse. But instead, you had this group fighting, that group fighting, the other group, people thinking that it's a bad thing to observe good business practices. It's a bad thing. You're not a good revolutionary if you have a problem losing money, that it's supposed to lose money. Really crazy attitudes that don't come anywhere close to how people should be thinking in this day and age and moving in the world, because there's no I mean, I had asked for it myself. What is the 10-year plan here? There's no plan even for the year. No plan. So you have a very messed up internal situation where people who have no experience running anything finally, because of this idea of being revolutionary and whatnot, end up with a multi-million-dollar asset in their hands. They don't know what to do with it. And so they screw things up very, very badly and leave it to others who do understand how you run a business. Even if it's a nonprofit, it's a business. And you have to have rules. Oh, that's the other thing. There should be no rules. No, you can't prosper and you can't continue that way. You have no future that way. And you leave yourselves open to people maneuvering to take the stations, plural, over from the inside. It's a very bad situation and great embarrassment, I think, to the history of so many people who gave so much of their time and their lives and their gifts to accomplish the exact opposite that we should have in strategically located regions of the United States. We should have a dependable source of information. But, you know, it's like pushing molasses uphill with a rake in winter or summer even. So I hope they work it out. Thanks, Daryl, for your call. Mahat, you're on the air from Manhattan.
Yes, greetings, beloveds. I want to say ditto on the BAI situation, first of all. It's a real head shaker. Owing millions of dollars now and not getting, for years, not getting the Corporation for Public Broadcasting funds, which, would be substantial funds. It's a situation where I think you described it very well. I know someone who got me involved in terms of going to the CAB, the local station board, and nothing ever changes. She used to go regularly for some time to the financial, I forget the exact title, but the financial committee. And she saw that the accounting practices were just, one of the main issues was that you had management that didn't know, as you just said, what they were doing, and there's no way to move them on. So, I remember a few years it was supposed to be evaluation of the management and all the management. That didn't happen, and people just got stuck. I shared one story about someone who was coming on air, raising funds for a private organization and using plagiarized information, and the management wasn't even interested in looking at and reviewing the documentation, although all of them were notified going back some years. So, like you said, what's the surprise is that it hasn't happened earlier. Okay.
That's because people, Gary among them, and he's in the leading role in this regard, they literally give their products to the station. They do everything possible. They're always available to help. But you have people, and I don't want to get too much further into it, but you have people who I would describe as unfit. They're unfit for the positions they hold.
Indeed,
And
I would call them slicksters and tricksters. Okay, and they got their own clique, their own fiefdom. And if you're not part of that inner circle, I mean, I did with some public relations background. I gave them a whole scenario in terms of when they change programming, how they could be inclusive of the community, even as just a front way, right? To at least appear like you're doing it the right way. You don't even give a thank you. You don't even get a thank you. But, Teresa, I want to go on to some dialogue with some conversation I heard earlier in the week. I heard a couple brothers that I'm going to push back on. I heard Lincoln say, well, let's not be sympathetic toward the Kurds. That doesn't make any sense because when a genocide is going down, it's problematic, especially if we're part of a community that has levels of genocide going against us. So that didn't make any sense. Also, I want to say to David, beloved David, that he was saying, well, they're citizens of the country they're in. They are a stateless people, and after World War One, Woodrow Wilson understood. I mean, they were enslaved by those. They call it the Middle East, but certain countries are that area of the world. And they were supposed to get self-determination and get out of being enslaved by those different certain countries there and get their own Kurdistan, if you will. Instead, France and Britain came up with another proposal, and they wound up being scattered in Iran, Iraq, Turkey, and Syria. Okay, now I heard this program on because David doesn't understand who the people are. On Monday on Letters in Politics, now that BAI is getting like the national program, he had a professor that brought some very interesting information. The professor was named Andrei Gubashez, and he's, I guess, mainly at the California Institute of Integral Studies in California. But those people had set up a university in what's called Khojavar and Rojava, and he was a visiting professor. He described a very, very unique community where the minorities, such as the Yazidi, we know they've been subject to genocide recently. Christians, even I heard on Coast, is a Christian denomination, sort of like the Sufis or the Muslims, dealing with esoteric Gnosticism type of a practice. Women, all the minority groups and the women are all protected around ideas of freedom and liberation. He also says they have special eco-environmental sustainability plans. So they had a very, very unique community that's not easily replicated in the so-called Middle East, because it's, how they designated the Middle East. That's something in itself. But I think that it's important to understand. And, Trump actually said, I mean, this is the most stupidest man on the planet. He actually said, well, they didn't help us during World War II and the invasion in Normandy. I mean,
well,
can
somebody
you believe
whispered that to him in the elevator, perhaps on his way to making that brilliant statement.
Yeah, he read something craziness on the internet, which makes no sense.
About the area we call the Middle East today, and I've been getting more into it lately, the truth of the Middle East will not easily be known. There's so much that could harm the overlords of yesterday if the truth were told today. That the problems that they caused, all these leading nations, France, England, everybody had a hand in destroying uh, countries all over the world. You go. Let's take a small and manageable region like the Caribbean. Everybody was there. Everybody was there doing whatever they wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
England, France, uh, the Netherlands, Denmark. you know, everybody was there doing something wrong that was to their advantage, stealing the resources, poisoning the land, capturing entire regions and turning them into slaves. That's the history people need to understand. The Kurds.
It hasn't changed very much. It's just taken different forms,
no, It hasn't changed, and yet there's so much pumped into making us believe that these things were just recent developments. They're not. They're not recent developments. The idea that Palestine is kind of new.
Mm-hmm.
No, it has existed for thousands and thousands of years. What then happened from that history period to this history period, where they basically are strangers in their own land? How did that happen?
Mm-hmm.
So we have a very distorted history all over Africa, a distortion, total distortion of history, so that the leaders of the world could dispatch and convince Native Africans actually to work against their own interests. We know this. But to this day, it has not been corrected. It has gone unchallenged, and we never link the initiatives of today to the barbarity of thousands of years ago, continuing straight forward from that time until now. Is there any wonder that Queen Elizabeth has found a new job for her grandson and his wife in Africa?
I haven't heard about that. What? I haven't heard about that. What's up with that?
Oh, they're on special. They're on special assignment. This is how Britain traditionally has gotten people they don't want, gotten them lost. Just send them to Africa on a special mission. Lots of marching and pomp and circumstance, but they've been driven out of the palace for a good 2 years or maybe 3.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. Oh, that's how Britain does it.
Mm-hmm.
The Caribbean has gotten all these governors general and all these, the titled people who they don't want. So they give them a ceremonial title and send them to some place that they themselves don't want to go. But in effect, don't overlook the fact that they are stand-ins for Britain. That's it. They are stand-ins for Britain, and in many cases reintroducing, even though they're not aware of it, but they reintroducing British culture, British law, British customs. You know, that's that's how they do it in the Caribbean. You have people who have no explainable reason for being in the Caribbean with all these rights and privileges and lots of feathers, lots of pomp and circumstance. It is because Britain is trying to get rid of them in Britain. They don't want them in Britain, so give them an assignment. Go, this place or go that place and have a lot of ceremonies. Have a lot of ceremonies, and come back in another 3 or 4 years. Let me send you someplace else.
So where's the couple been sent?
Um, in a minute. I'm tempted to say South Africa, but I'm not sure. Let me
But somewhere
find
in
that out.
Africa for sure?
I'm sorry?
Somewhere in Africa.
They're going to be living there.
Get out. Wow.
Yeah, that's how the Queen does it. And she learned from the best. That's how they do it. They develop a reason to send you abroad, which means they get you out of any local discussions in London or wherever, and you're gone. You're a distant memory for at least 3 to 4 years.
Wow.
That's how they do it. So don't trust that little old lady with her little purse. She's got a way of doing things.
Well, you know what David Icke says about them. He calls them the reptilians. He might have something there.
It might. It very well might. Thanks for calling in today.
Thank you.
All righty. 888-874-4888. Harvey, are you there?
Hello, ultra wonderful Utrice.
Wow, I went another notch. I'm now ultra wonderful.
We all love you.
Ultra wonderful, Harvey. How are you doing?
Very good, and we all love you very much, and we're all sending happiness and good health to you.
Thank you. I could use it so much.
Yeah. Well,
Thanks so much.
We're all focusing on you because you're the best. You're the best, Utrice, the best. Here's the California report, and while Trump fiddles, California burns.
Yes.
Yesterday here in Berkeley, the hot winds were extra strong, and all the vegetation is bone dry. And the old technology of fossil fuel burning power plants that generate and distribute electricity doesn't work here anymore, as climate destabilization causes more drought and out-of-control wildfires. And now, more than ever, it's time for California, as well as the rest of America, to reinvest in decentralized renewable energy micro power grids, like the one here in California that Pacific Gas and Electric runs. And Pacific Gas and Electric's power blackouts are costing local communities millions of dollars in lost business, as well as food spoilage, and putting people with medical conditions in harm's way. At the same time, millions of gasoline and methane-powered electric generators, which the utilities suggest that everybody gets, are not the answer because they run on gas, which is contributing to more climate heating and toxic air pollution. And gasoline in California now costs $4 a gallon. And, people fill up their cars. They go to gas stations to fill up their cars in case they have to escape the wildfires. So there may not be gasoline for the electric generators. And so it turns out that California's major environmental problems revolve around power and water. And approximately 40% of California's electric grid is methane-powered, which means more greenhouse gases, causing more climate destabilization, leading to longer droughts and out-of-control wildfires. And at the same time, the U.S. Army and the U.S. Geological Service has told us that fracking for oil and methane lubricates fault lines, which cause earthquakes, which is the last thing we here in California need. And fracking for fossil fuels also use millions of gallons of California's freshwater resources, and because they mix highly toxic chemicals with the water while fracking, they're poisoning our state's freshwater aquifers. But the good news is that once manufactured and installed, solar panels use no water in the generation of clean, renewable electricity. In addition, they have no moving parts, make no noise, cause no chemical reaction or greenhouse gas emissions, and are virtually maintenance-free over their 20 to 30-year warranted lifestyle. So we need our California government to step up renewable energy incentives for solar, wind, geothermal, and battery technology-based microgrids. And it's time for us here in California and the rest of the world to get star-powered, and I say, let's get solar. I just want to thank you, Therese, for letting me say that.
What is the sense of whether California is actually making progress on the issue of its energy dilemma?
Well, what's happening is that, unfortunately, and this is the way we seem to work, as long as people are comfortable, they'll go with the old technology and the old ways. But it takes a lot of what I call D&D, death and destruction, before change will happen. And that's what's happening here in California. And I think that the rest of America should just watch very closely. There's a recent fire, again, another fire where thousands of acres are burned out. People have to flee. Thousands of people fleeing the area. They think, once again, it's the PG&E power lines that are doing it. One seemed to have broken just before the fire broke out. This is the way it goes. There has to be a lot of destruction before people will start changing. And even the newspapers here, they were telling everybody to get electric generators. They weren't even telling people to put solar panels on the rooftop and plug their electric car into the sun and have a battery. They weren't telling them that. But now, finally, the newspapers, like the San Francisco Chronicle, are suggesting that maybe renewable energy is the way to go and stepping away from fossil fuels. So this is what it takes, but the losses are in the billions, and about last week, too. One of the major refineries in California blew up. Their huge tanks storing gasoline caught fire because of some earthquake thing or something or other. Everybody had to shelter down and stay in their houses, so the toxic air. Highways closed down, major arteries from San Francisco to Sacramento closed down. I mean, this fossil fuel game is over, and it's killing us and our planet. And that's what Trump and his administration represent. These are the people. He's such a loser, and he's dragging us down with us. And we have to individually take power by reinvesting our dollars in renewable energy, by going to our city councils and telling them, just like New York did, divest from fossil fuel industry and reinvest in renewables. We have to take the power. We have to buy electric cars and put solar panels on our roof and move away from this destructive old technology that's killing us and our planet.
Thanks so much for calling in. There's always so much to learn from you, and you put it to us in a way that we can easily understand, we can easily grasp. Thank you, Harvey, for calling in today.
Thank you, Therese.
Thanks. David from Brooklyn, you're on the air. Somebody was talking about you today, David.
Yes. I have a number of things I'd like to speak about, but I'm going to start off on number one, this so-called drug war. The way I see it, it makes no sense to create a whole infrastructure around the idea of keeping people from taking a small section of the many drugs that are available, like the opioids. I don't believe there should be any laws about like we have now that connect using certain types of drugs like the opioids with the police, and having a tremendous billion-dollar infrastructure of criminalizing people who have a difficult time or trouble or a problem with dealing with certain types of drugs. As far as I see, there are many, many things that people use in terms of not only pharmaceutical drugs or the opioids that are made or foods that people eat. There are many things that are injurious to people that people use, like alcohol and cigarettes and all these things. But I don't think that we should be making all of these things illegal to the point where people can be charged with a crime, and this is turned over to police agencies and creating a billion dollar industry that involves prisons, that involves the police agencies of all sorts, and go around the world. I think if we had a just type of society, people who are having problems with these different types of pharmaceuticals, drugs, and foods could be helped by a public policy that would treat people or help them deal with the problems they're having with these things. I'm sure there are a number of people, a large number, that die every year from the bad foods they eat. There are people who die in large numbers for the alcohol they drink. There are people who die in large numbers again for the cigarettes and other devices that they smoke. So, just singling out certain ones and making them illegal and railroading the people on to prison through the system makes no sense to me. And I think we need to drop these laws and create a public policy for all people in the country who does not lead to criminal prosecution for difficulty with those items that they have determined to be illegal. People ought to be helped as a way of being in the interest of all the citizens of the country to help them deal with anything that is injurious, but not necessarily making it illegal. I don't believe in prohibition, and I think that's not good at all, but help those people who are in that position where they're having difficulty, whatever the substance happens to be, food, drink, smoking, or the other opioids that are available. So that's my contribution. I think that's very important that we should consider that. Dismantle this tremendous infrastructure, and it would save us a lot of money and make people here a lot healthier.
But that is not good. That is not a good plan. From the point of view of governance, that's not a good plan. Helping people to overcome their addictions and so forth.
well,
that is a really bad plan.
Well, the point is that the powers that be, the ruling powers, I'm sure they don't want that, but I think that'd be a good plan to help people deal with all the things that they need to do in terms of public health. I mean, up here in Brooklyn, you see there was a tremendous problem with public health with things other than opioids also, with food. I mean, we have a tremendous obesity problem. We have a tremendous diabetes problem. We have all kinds of health problems that affect people. And I don't believe in locking up people because they eat bad food, but we need to have a policy that we would help people eat the right things and not only stay away from addiction to opioids and things like that, but do things that are good for health for all people. And that's the way I look at it. So I don't want people locked up because they smoke marijuana or have a problem with opioids. We need to help those people and create a system that is not based on law enforcement and police and locking people up who have difficulty with these items.
Why do you think there's such resistance? I mean, these points that you've made have been made for decades now. People have said, we are not winning the drug war. We have a problem with overcrowded jails, and even more so because they're extending law enforcement consequences to younger and younger people. So we have jails now that are filled with young people who should be helped into leading productive lives.
Yes, well, those who rule want it that way. That's why we have it that way. And it went into overdrive, I think, with the Clinton administration. He packed the jails with brown and black bodies. And it works for some people. There's a lot of money involved. Anytime you build up an infrastructure like the one we have now, I mean, they don't want to give up that type of infrastructure. There's all money involved in it. And so those who rule also, there's a lot of profit to be made out of illegal, so-called illegal items that people use. So there's a very powerful force that's going to resist making this legal, you see, because perhaps the profit will not be available anymore if these things are legal and they cannot make a massive amount of money by selling illegal items that actually kill people. So I think those are big factors. It makes this is not a policy decision that makes sense because it's just ridiculous to have one thing that is dangerous, alcohol, perfectly legal, and another thing that is dangerous, illegal. You know, they're both injurious to people. So we need to deal with things in terms of helping people, not making profit for people by having things kept the same as it is now. And I think it's very difficult because the people don't run the country. Those who rule run it, and they like it the way it is, and they're making it even harder every day. So that's the problem. People have to get to the point where they understand that they should lean on these sociopaths that run the country and get them to lean on them enough to make them budge on this item that I'm mentioning now.
Well, as usual, much food for thought. Thank you, David, for calling in and contributing. Thank you all for calling in and contributing. I did note at the beginning of the program that while the discussion of the political situation in Washington, D.C. was not off limits, I noticed that nobody bothered to raise it. Very interesting. I don't know how to interpret that just yet, but we see some things coming down the pike, and they're very serious in the implication as to how they're going to restructure. I mean, it is always a matter of how they are going to fix their problems. And the one thing that they've been consistent at is that the problems are fixed on the backs of people who didn't cause the problem. I don't know anybody who is connected to uh, this, this spy versus spy thing, or the grievous offenses that Trump is talking about. I don't know anybody connected to that. It's a very, very, very white world, if you notice. And even now, as they are looking at ways in which to deal with this, possible prosecutions, uh, possible sanctions, and all of this other stuff, and even getting the president out of office, we the people are not involved in this. We the people have had no part in this. It's them. They are the problem. They are the problem. So we need to make that clear. We need to keep that in mind. But it is the weekend, and you should take it easy and surround yourselves with people who bring positive dimension to your life and add joy to your life, and do something that you enjoy, and come back on Monday all refreshed. Bye-bye.